Welcome to the Drachneck and Friends official podcast, where we peel back the curtain on puzzle games and the people who make them. I'm Syrenne, the producer at Drachneck and Friends, and I'm joined as always by Alan Hazelden, the head Drachneck at Drachneck and Friends.
Hey there.
Today, we're joined by Andrejs Klavins, who you may know from their work on the Golden Idol games. How are you doing today?
Great, thank you.
So can you sort of talk a little bit about the Golden Idol games for anyone that hasn't heard of them? How would you describe them?
Yeah, sure. So we are internally calling them deduction games. Effectively these are narrative-rich puzzle games wherein each game consists of a number of cases. We're calling them scenarios, and first game consists of 12 murders, and you're facing a sort of frozen in time vignette visual which you can explore, and then the game asks you to answer some questions by filling in some blanks or filling in some puzzle to kind of test your knowledge whether you figured out what's actually been going on here.
What was the original inspiration for making Case of the Golden Idol?
I think the biggest inspiration, obviously, is Return of the Obra Dinn, Lucas Pope indie hit. But I think important motivator was Mark Brown's video about detective games and issues in them, which formulated for us this idea that, okay, maybe there's a problem, like there are not enough detective games which actually offer a detective experience.
And I guess I'm kind of curious, did the setting in the world come first, or did the gameplay come first?
It was gameplay first. Our earliest prototype was made with my paint art in an engine called Construct, in which you can quickly hack up things. And it was set in nowadays in Polish student dormitory, where a student has died because he has accidentally overdosed insulin. So, yeah, something completely else.
So, obviously, the video highlighting the sort of deficiencies in design in this space up to the point had given you inspiration, but how did you begin coming up with like the UI design? Like how much sort of trial and error was involved in like managing that, adjusting that? I'm assuming that there were a lot of playtests involved.
Yes, quite a lot. Our initial sort of validation step with this student dormitory example was the earliest version had just 2 locations where you can click on things, see them closer up, or read some texts, but there were no puzzles. I just asked Ernest to tell me what does he think is going on here. When we felt that, okay, this could be interesting, we tried to turn it into a puzzle. Earliest puzzles had very dynamic sort of sentence building mechanics where you could I think you had to construct a sentence from subject, verb, object, and then sort them in the correct order. But that we discovered was pretty overwhelming, and it was hard to communicate what exactly we want players to tell us. And if we asked them very direct questions, then it felt like we were hinting too much. So at that point, we decided, okay, let's just try out this kind of simpler, less idealistic approach that there are empty slots in the scroll text, and the players just gather loads of phrases, words, and they have to decide which they put in where. There we, again, quickly enough discovered that offering loads of options to players actually makes the experience kind of worse, and that there is value in differentiating the types of words that we expect in some places, because sometimes it would be like brown word, downward, and players have no idea what the hell do we want from them, like what kind of sentence are we even talking about. So that was all streamlining, but up to this point I would still say that we hadn't fully discovered the game. But in my mind, one of like main breakthroughs was we had built a small scenario, and that felt okay to play. But then we built a more complex one, the Mother Little Mermaid from the first game, and then we discovered that some players, like, they would play and they input something wrong, they get message wrong, and they feel like, okay, they want to quit. Like, they don't know what's wrong. Like, there are so many options what can be wrong. Like, they're making no progress in the game. And then we thought, maybe it would be nice if they could confirm the names of the characters somewhere. Like, maybe when you open a close-up of a character, you can drag their names there. And we tried, and everyone really loved naming people. And at that point, we had this realization that, all right, we don't need this one very hard puzzle, but we need sort of a series of puzzles which gradually build understanding in the game and confirm information. And that creates this nice, more gradual pacing for the game. And I'd say when we discovered that and validated, that was when Golden Idol formula was born.
And then how long was it between like having that first insulin in the dorm room case to like, we figured this out, this should be like a bunch of smaller puzzles that each interlink to the overall puzzle?
I think we arrived at our early prototype in February, and I think this works moment was like roughly 2 months later.
Oh wow, that's pretty great.
Yeah, it was a relatively short time. Yeah, it didn't take that much long.
And I'm curious what your process is for coming up with the individual scenarios. Like, do you plot out the overall story arcs first and then figure out what points in that would be interesting to zoom into, or do you like come up with the scenarios and then figure out how to string them together, or is it a bit of both?
We have very much this approach that we try to start from very big picture because we're sort of afraid of writing ourselves in corner or running into plot holes. So typically our approach is we don't know what exactly the story is, but we know what kind of story it should be, like what are its mood, themes, and what kind of plot beats would make sense there to be. Like, for instance, for the first game, we knew that we need a plot beat. Protagonist discovers supernatural qualities of Golden Idol for the first time. So we knew we needed that. Then we'd have discussions about, okay, like let's define this plot beat. If we have already some kind of inputs up to this point, what's already known about characters, and what are like sort of the definite outputs that have to result from this plot beat. That part is typically not that difficult, but then comes the difficult part, which is okay, now we need some kind of local story which works as a sort of independent story, but at the same time also provides this plot beat, sort of fulfills this requirement. And that's much trickier. In the first game, where we had this idea that it always has to be a murder, we had to think, okay, who's gonna die, how they're gonna die, and how does it fulfill the big story requirements. And then in this part, we start with sort of chronology of events. Like, okay, these are the motivations of characters. This is what should logically happen. And then we try to figure out, okay, but where do we make the stop point? Like what is player playing? What are they discovering? And here we always run into a problem of drama versus investigation, because it's always exciting to show something dramatic, like someone's falling from a cliff, but that kind of spoils the investigation part, because instead of showing a body by the cliff where you have to figure out what happened to the body, you kind of already know what's going on. But on the other hand, it sometimes serves better as a spectacle. Yeah, and from that moment, and usually when we work out details of this local mystery, if it feels like we are happy to slightly tweak the big story elements as well. My typical example is that we originally had planned to kill off third game's character Walter Keane, the gentleman robber, in the forest cabin scenario. But when we started writing it, we realized, he seems like a cool guy. Actually, we'd like to keep him around, and so he actually became a pretty central character in the game. Yeah, but we try also not to plan out ahead what exactly should happen, like in detail. Like we just wanna, broadly we need this plot beat, but what exactly is going to happen then we will discover then when we start working on that plot beat. That's pretty much our process.
And were you mostly trying to make the cases in chronological order, or?
Actually, for the very first game, the original order of scenarios was that there's this reading of Will scenario and Little Mermaid in scenario, and we had developed them in the opposite order and also flipped them in the originally they were swapped. But we felt that players were pretty confused, and we were a bit afraid that maybe we were sending some kind of like mixed message that players are not sure what's happening when. And then we decided, okay, no, let's offer everything in linear order. In Rise, as you probably know, we completely dropped it, and the timeline is like you visit events very sporadically, which is somewhat linked to the fact that we had to work with an expanded team, and people were working on sort of various bigger story arcs, and their not being chronological was pretty valuable for us.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot we could dig into with the sequel, and like how it's different structurally, and also how your team was different. Yeah, I guess I'm curious, like how big was the team for the first game, and how big was it for the second?
Yeah, so first game we made just two of us, and Kyle Misko composed music. Second game was built by a much larger team, 4 full-time employees, and then 5 content creators as contractors, and then more other contractors. Composer Paul joined, and roughly around 10 or a bit more people worked on the game. So it was definitely much harder. It was quite a switch for us. Instead of just being 2 of us, now you have to align and manage work of loads of people.
Yeah, I mean, how did you manage that larger team? Like, how did you make that switch from a tiny team to a much larger team successfully?
Yeah, it was definitely challenging. Where I think our biggest challenge was balancing. So we found as contractors people who we believed had potentially best experience building narrative mysteries. Will from UK had built a small detective game before that, which we tried out and enjoyed. Bill and Danny from Sydney, they had audio, sort of podcast format escape room show, and they've been building escape rooms for a long time. And then Marcus and Nathan from US Utah also had their mystery podcast, but it was more like sort of like role-playing mysteries where one is kind of like a puzzle game master, and then the other one is trying to solve them. And as we didn't want to micromanage people, and also we believe that you get the best out of people if you give them broader goals, and then they can use the creativity to express themselves. So our ideal was that, hey, here is like maybe this narrative arc or this scenario. These are its goals. Let's work together, but it's primarily on you to figure out how to build it. What's the mystery, and do all those things. So yeah, there was this part of wanting to give creative freedom to empower them. But then on the other hand, the challenge was it still has to be coherent. It still has to pass some kind of quality threshold or things that are important to us, like what makes the game feel like it's a Golden Idol game, but not to become too controlling, and not to create a chilling effect that people are like, they feel like we are making all the creative decisions for them. That was an interesting challenge. Primarily, I think we would often quite a lot challenge sort of the soundness of events underlying initial scenario ideas. Like someone would jump in a scenario and kill someone else, and we'd say, hey, wait, why is that person killing someone else? Like you need a good reason to kill someone. It doesn't happen so lightly. Let's work on this some more. And then it's hard for me to express because I think it's kind of vibes or mood based. But Golden Idol, on the one hand, it's a pretty silly game. Like it has funny moments, funny characters. But on the other hand, we never wanted to be or to feel like cartoony or goofy. Like the events should have logical causation, and they should feel somewhat realistic or plausible. And balancing these things so the game doesn't feel farcical, that was also often challenging.
And did you design any scenarios yourself in the sequel, or were you just only able to did you have to have more of a director role and you just didn't have time to get into the weeds and design something specific yourself?
If it was first game, me and Ernest, we kind of worked closely together on all content. On the second game, I had much less time to work on the content. Ernest as well. He became more of this creative director who had to have lots of meetings with other people and let their ideas or challenge their concepts. I, on the other hand, had to manage the project altogether, be more in a producer role for this whole thing. But we did build together. We built together all introductory arc and the tutorial. Like we always want to do early experience because it leaves the biggest impression. So I think it's super important. And we built not all, but most of conclusion arc and the final scenario. So still, we did work on quite a bit of things, but definitely less.
Is that something that, as you look forward to what your team is going to be working on in the future, obviously, you've announced that there's going to be DLC for Rise of the Golden Idol, but even beyond that, is like the getting back into the weeds, working on some of that creative energy, is that something that you are excited to get back into and go do, or are you sort of happy with taking the step back and operating in more of that producer role?
No, I definitely want to return to more creative role. Second project in that sense was creatively it was I wouldn't say less fulfilling because we still had to steer all of that, but there was much more of my time was dealing with various non-creative problems. So in that sense, we kind of want to get back to this more, I guess, fun part of game development.
Makes sense. One thing that I've noticed, and Alan and I have talked about the different versions of the Golden Idol games, is that they are different on different platforms. Like the UI is different. The UI gets optimized more on mobile than it does for PC, etc. Like, what was the original process and thought process behind going ahead and like doing that?
The backstory is effectively that a couple of months after the launch of the first game, received critical acclaim, and I wouldn't say like its initial sales weren't like super strong, but they were kind of climbing. It was showing steady sort of sales persistence. And our publisher Playstack, they were really happy with it, and they said, hey, we want to try to make like lots of things happen with it. And one of the things they tried was getting a Netflix deal, and they managed to do it. And the requirement is to have a mobile version, but our first game and also the second one, they are built in Godot engine, and that point we wouldn't like it wouldn't have worked with Netflix API, and there would have been like lots of challenges. So it meant that Playstack decided, okay, they will actually rebuild the game in Unity as mobile versions, and as a result, there kind of now exist parallel versions, and same way it happened for the sequel, where guess if Godot's engine-like maturity was maybe a bit further that moment, we might have avoided it, but in this case there was a bit of parallel development, which again kind of increased the difficulty of producing the game, because not only we had to develop just content and game as usual, but we had to pass on these materials, export them in friendly manner to our publishers team so they can recreate it in Unity engine. That taking in mind also that the sequel had to be translated in 11 languages. Golden Idol is not at all a friendly game to translate. This became very complex project.
Yeah, I actually wanted to ask you if you had any war stories from localizing the game, because it seems like a very tough game to localize. So yeah, were there any things that like you wouldn't even have thought of initially, that like when you came to the localization step, you're like, oh no, this makes everything 5 times harder?
No, we had watched a video how Lucas Pope had struggled localizing Return of Obra Dinn. So we knew that this will be very painful, but a few war stories that come to my mind. So one is noticing, for instance, in how many places we have texts baked in art. Like in the second game, there is this garden retreat scenario where there is this serene nightly garden, and in the background you can see, like from the other side, like the Harmony Foundation logo initials. But now you need to create and draw them in a bunch of other languages where the initials are different, and in Asian languages you have turned them into hieroglyphs. Drawing them, flipping them, and realizing that there are quite a bit of places like that in the game was something we definitely did not expect. We had to drop one puzzle just because it was not translatable. It was a puzzle where, like how the acronym idle that they give to the device in the second game comes, and the idea was that each word that you slot in is like it forms in the end like acronym IDLE, but IDLE is a very different word in various languages and with different word count and letter count. So yeah, that was just not doable. We had to drop that one. And then I know, I remember. Yeah, originally this is one of the reasons why we had this idea. We've always felt a bit ambivalent about the fact that grammar often helps you figure out things which can be filled in. Like it's especially sometimes annoying if I know you have lots of suspects, but say only one of them is a man. In that case, if you use any pronouns in the skull text, it will immediately hint whether it's he or she. Or sometimes, people look and say, oh, okay, here only past tense makes sense, so I'm going to just look at the words in the past tense. And then I thought, hey, wouldn't it be cool if all the words you gather are in a very neutral tense, and then when you slot them in the sentence, it kind of grammatically adjusts. And if you fit somewhere in like male name, then pronouns that refer to that part in the sentence change to he. That felt like a cool idea, but then we realized, oh no, it means that we'll need to create like translation variations for every word that can be slotted in this place.
Yeah, that's so much work.
Yep. And in English we could have pulled it off, but in all like these 11 languages we realized that's not realistic, and so we
because like all the nouns would change their gendered versions as well in some languages.
Yep. Loads of dynamic challenges. I mean, just when working near the launch of the game, we'd go through these so-called language quality assurance rounds, and after each round, there'd be like 40, 60 Jira items in the Jira board that we had to go through, and many of them were like small things, like here text is not splitting correctly, or here something's getting out of bounds. But then you discover something interesting, like, in the loading screen, typically you have like, 50 and percent sign, right? But it turns out in Turkish, the percent sign is before the number that follows it. So now you have to slightly adjust such a thing. Or the fact that, I forgot what it, I think it's in Spanish, question marks is also at the start of the sentence, and it's kind of flipped, which in some cases also would cause challenges for us. Localization for Golden Idol was, I wouldn't say nightmare, but close to that.
Do you think you've learned any lessons from these two games that you can, do you have some kind of like smart design ideas in your head of like, oh, well, if we just rejig this design thing, we can make localization easier by doing that? Or do you think it's just an unavoidable price you have to pay for this kind of game?
I don't think we have very good idea. No, I think there are a few situations where we looked at it and thought, if only we had built it differently, it would have been much easier. One thing that I think it's an inevitable trade-off. One thing that we could always do is treat all text fields as some kind of sort of like more neutral, dynamic boxes. Like, you open a letter, and it's not fixed size, but it's as big as it needs to be in the language. But the downside of it kind of like removes the charm of everything being hand-drawn and looks very in-world. Like it becomes, like maybe as you know in some games you open a text material and it's always like this one standardized pop-up. Yeah, honestly, I don't know how we'd approach it differently. Yeah, no good learnings, to be honest.
What was the gap between going from Golden Idol to Golden Idol's DLCs Case of the Golden Idol 1, to its DLCs, to Rise of the Golden Idol, to now working on its DLCs? Like, are you taking breaks in between and like doing sort of post-mortems to analyze what you can be doing to improve, or are you just keeping the momentum going and moving forward?
Yeah, this has been quite not sprint, but the other long one. I suddenly
Marathon.
Yeah, where like in my case, for me, shortly, like 1 month after the release of the Case of the Golden Idol, also my first child, my daughter, was born. So that was quite also lots of new experiences and challenges. And after the launch of the first game, like the moment when we saw that it has positive reception and it's not like a flop, we knew that okay, we want to do a DLC just because it's kind of like next easiest thing to do. Like it gives us an answer what to build next without us having to reinvent everything and then build a new engine and new game. We had a pretty good idea what we wanted to do, and during that development of the DLC, firstly we discovered that it turns out fitting all the story ideas that we have in 12 scenarios is much easier than in 3 scenarios, and we actually have to like shorten things massively, and then in the end realize, okay, we need these to be 2 DLCs, otherwise like it's just too hard to fit all the ideas in there. Playstack agreed, do that, and at that point our takeaways when looking at the base game and thinking about the DLCs was that we want them to be a bit more challenging, like it's gonna be more experience for fans, more dedicated audience, and we wanted to explore this time switching mechanic which appears in the second DLC. Like that was often a challenge in the first game, that if you have this frozen in time scene, it's easy to show various things like spatially, but chronologically it's actually pretty difficult. Like say someone's taken a thing from someone else, and you can't really show it. Yes, you can only show that one person now has it. And so exploring various moments in time opened much more, but at the same time it also created so much more content to create, because now there's lots more scenes to observe, and it's there's a risk of it being even more overwhelming in terms of how much stuff there is. Then and unfortunately we didn't have much time for breaks. Like immediately after the second DLC, we jumped in developing the sequel, gathering the team and doing everything for that. But there, our observations, our takeaway for sequel was that we, as the first game was so positively received, you always have this sequel challenge. People kind of want the same, but they don't. They want also something new. So you should change some things, but not too many things. And in the end, I'd say we kind of played it more conservatively. Like we tried to innovate more in the setting, in the story, less in how the game plays. Important thing that we did do is these chapter puzzles, which are in the second game. This is something we wanted to build for the first game, but we did not have enough time and decided to scrap that feature. But for the sequel, we wanted to make it, and I think it's been a good decision, because it's one of the more universally positively received features.
Yeah, it's really interesting that was something you wanted in the first game, because it felt like a really, really strong evolution of the formula. Do you think that with the sequel, knowing that you were going to be doing that, it gave you more power to make the story more non-chronological and bounce around in the timeline? Or do you think you like wanted to do that anyway, just in terms of like making the pacing a bit different?
At first, we had this very ambitious idea that the players can access all 5 chapters immediately, but they just choose in what order they play them, thus creating a kind of like non-linear playthrough, like maybe some like one person's Golden Idol playthrough is different. We quite soon had to drop this idea because we realized if our characters appear in various chapters, it's kind of spoiling some puzzles. Like you can't make an interesting puzzle about discovering this character if you've seen it already in a different chapter. And then we thought, okay, fine. We'll actually like control the timeline, how it's set, not spoil it, and instead like focus on thematically like exposing the characters over time. But the chapter puzzles, they appeared because of 2 reasons. One was people really loved the moment when they realized that scenarios are connected, and they always wanted kind of to express it, fill in something. But we thought that it would be a really nice experience if you play through all the scenarios in a chapter, and now you have to revisit them, but looking for something else. You're kind of like reframing what you're looking for. In the end, even though I'm happy how they work, but I'd say still all chapter puzzles are relatively short. Like they add, I don't know, like 10 to half an hour of gameplay time. Like the initial playthroughs of each scenario still create the bulk of the game.
When did you begin working with PlayStack on the original game?
It was roughly a year from starting prototyping. We had tried doing marketing on our own. We were bad at it. We failed to attract interest in the game or gather enough wish lists. And so then our next step was looking for publishers. And luckily, they were one of the publishers that got interested in us. They actually approached us. And now we had a very nice meeting with their head of marketing, Rob, who in this honest manner said that this game will be very tough to market because it's not like very visually appealing, and its gameplay is mostly happening in people's heads. Like you can't make a nice GIF about Golden Idol. But as they've played the demo, they've really enjoyed the process. They still want to bet on this project. And we thought, that's a very honest answer. That kind of convinced us that we want to cooperate with them.
And how much of the game was in that demo that you sent them at that time?
Our demo actually was quite big. I mean, it's currently still quite big. There are 4 scenarios. Initial one, cliffside, the death of the gentleman with a horse, reading of the will, and Little Mermaid Inn. There were like, say, around 2 hours of gameplay. Well, maybe a bit less, but maybe 1.5 to 2. So yeah, it definitely allowed them to kind of get the teeth in.
As we sort of wrap up, Alan, do you have any last questions?
Just as a kind of a free card, what's been your favorite part of working on these games?
I think the sort of like the happiest moments are we have this. So we have the phase where we work out the concept of the local scenario, all its like mysteries and etc. And then we start already building a playable, testable version of it, and then during playtesting we discover what works, what doesn't, and I kind of don't like the games or our scenarios where the players have had their like big revelation pretty soon. Like they quickly understand everything that's going on, and then they're just like sorting out like details. But when the opposite happens, they are gradually gathering details, and then they have this like big revelation moment. They audibly gasp. They're like, oh, and they understand what's going on. That's such a sweet point. Like then it's like payoff for all that silent, cringy feeling when you silently observe a playtest and see how everyone's getting confused about things that you never thought of. But yeah, then you get these moments of triumph, and I think these I really enjoy.
Awesome. And do you have any questions for us while we have you?
Yes, definitely. I guess it's a difficult question, but I'll ask it anyway. What do you think hasn't been done or is missing in mystery games that we can play so far? Like, do you have some like ideas? Like, why that isn't a mystery game which does that, or happens something like that? Yeah, can you like just rant about it?
So it's interesting, and I think that one thing that I really enjoy, especially following the release of Case the Golden Idol, is that there are other games that now take some of those gameplay elements and put them into other games that are doing different things. And so it's like, for me, I feel like a mystery, like a really good mystery, not game, like a show or a movie or a book, is a well-told story that is curated from start to finish, that you and maybe the character are figuring out things along the way, leading up to progressively bigger and bigger reveals, and at the end, it recontextualizes how you think about everything. And I think that there are a lot of games that are very good at one of those two things, like you're figuring out things along the way, or it has a big twist at the end. But I don't think there's a lot of games that fully do both, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for me, I think I'm really interested in like the perspective that the player has in these games, and like, is there a player character or not? Like Oberdin, like nominally has a player character, but it's really just a hand wave. And your game, you just like, you don't even have it. You just like, oh yeah, you're this omniscient presence. You're seeing these scenes, but you aren't anybody specific. I think that there's going to be a lot of games, I think, that put you in the role of like a private investigator or a spy, where like it would make sense that like you're writing these reports, and you're more embedded in the world. And I don't know if that's actually like an improvement over your formula where you're just like you're just there and watching. But I think that's something that a lot of the successful games in this genre haven't really leaned into. And I think with the exception of the Duck Detective, which gives you like a really like that's very much a character in that world who has a personality. But yeah, I think there's space for leaning into that more.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting area, like something we've been also wondering about. Like mystery games are about kind of like discovering and proving you have knowledge, but instead of just proving you have it, but applying the knowledge through a character is an interesting problem.
Definitely. And I don't know if, we'll come up with the solution on this podcast, but it's definitely an interesting place to find the genre in. So where can people find you? And do you have anything that you want to plug for the audience?
Except for both games, honestly, not. I mean, I have a Blue Sky and Twitter account, but I'm very inactive my socials, but yeah, if someone's interested, follow. I think it's just my name and surname in Blue Sky. Occasionally I tweet something about the game. Yeah, Andrejs Klavins .Blue Sky Social. Yep, that's all I can offer.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah.
Yep, thanks for having me.
And thank you for listening to the Draknek and Friends official podcast. Our music is by Priscilla Snow, who you can find at ghoulnoise.bandcamp.com. Our podcast artwork is by Adam DeGrandis. Our podcast is edited by Melanie Zawodniak. Please rate and review us on your podcast service of choice, and be sure to tune in next episode for more interesting conversations.